change establishing a historic special area zone for the Bruner Schmitz House at 1410 River Road. If adopted, the historic special area zone will allow limited commercial and residential uses on the property. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this previously and voted unanimously to recommend approval of the zone change to City Council. The criteria for establishing a special area zone are found in EC 9.3020 and EC 9.8865, which are located on pages 23 and 24 of your council agenda packet.
So that all sounds great, City Manager, but could we just have a little brief, what is this hearing about? And yeah.
Yes, absolutely. My name is Stephen Oakes. I'm with the Planning Division. And a brief description of this is there's a house located at 1410 River Road that recently got their Eugene Historic Landmark designation, and subsequently have applied to have kind of a specific zone only for that home developed, with uses that contribute to the historic preservation of the home. And so the uses in the ordinance that's proposed are some general office uses, a restaurant use, and then a couple of residential uses also. And so it is hoped by allowing these uses that then the house would remain in its kind of historic state.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So now I'm supposed to ask, do any counselors need to disclose any conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts? I don't see that anyone does, so have that on the record. And then I know that we're going to open it up for, I guess I open and close the hearing portion. And I know that Councilor Braun has some questions to ask.
Yeah, I don't quite understand the purpose of this ordinance. I mean, I understand intellectually what the words mean, but I'm having a hard time understanding why the landowner needs to apply for this special zone just for that house and the surrounding 0.44 of an acre, and why it can't be preserved, why they can't go ahead and develop it without this special ordinance, I guess is my main question.
Okay. I guess the answer to that is they aren't required to ask for this zone. It is up to the owner to ask for this. And then we do have a process to establish if they meet these certain criteria to grant that request if they ask for it. Under the existing zoning and their current historic designation, there is they can do residential uses, but it could also be developed for R2 medium density on that parcel, and so in that case it may conflict with a historic designation of it, but there's nothing that's requiring them to do this.
I see. So they want to do a commercial development there. Is that the idea, or they want to convert it to office? What do they want to do there? Do we know?
Yes, I think from just what I've seen, the signs outside there, that it looks like they're looking at probably putting an accounting office in the short term, but maybe doing something like it could be a restaurant or something along those lines.
I saw that sign. I drove by today. I had an image in my mind. I know which house that is. So I drove by and sure enough, it was the same one. Well, I guess I'm not opposing this, by the way. I just had a hard time kind of understanding why they had to go through this whole thing. When that parcel was separated from the surrounding 7.78 acres and sold to the party that owns it now, it was. Well, I guess my question is, could they have changed the zoning without it being a historical zone to a commercial use?
No, they couldn't have, because it does remain designated for medium density residential in the Metro Plan. So they would have had to.
And that would have been difficult, if not to say impossible, to change that to a commercial use.
Yes, they would have had to gone through a Metro Plan amendment, or they could have gone through a planned unit development and then some really limited commercial type developments they're probably similar to the type of commercial development they're asking for.
Okay. All right. But part of the ordinance also on page 5. This is the actual ordinance. It says section 1, subsection A. It says the purpose is to afford special treatment and protection so that the uses permitted and restrictions imposed will preserve and allow rehabilitation of landmarks, character-defining architectural features. And couldn't that happen without this ordinance? I mean, can the landowner simply decide, well, hey, I'm just going to preserve this and protect it without this ordinance?
Yes. Yes, they could remain with the same zoning and then would need to keep it in its either existing state or, I guess, go to multifamily development on that site.
Okay.
So-
I'm aware of many really cool historic houses around town that are not in special historical zones, but apparently they were already zoned for either residential and/or commercial. So they absolutely have to have this ordinance to convert it to commercial use. Is that the idea here?
Yes. Well, there were a couple other options to do that, but I think none of them.
Easier this way? And
Yes, and this is the one
Sure,
option
plan,
of getting
okay.
commercial that does require them to stay with the historic
Sure.
part of
Okay.
it. So.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to support the request to designate this as a historical landmark. It's one of the older homes in the River Road, Santa Clara area. And so is it my understanding that the house will basically have to stay intact, even if they choose to make it a multi-dwelling? I mean, it has to have some of its original characteristics, I would think.
Yes, that is correct. Once it was zoned, before the zoning even occurred, just it being designated as a city historic landmark, it now needs to go through a historic review approval for any kind of major alteration or anything like that to the site. So they can make changes, but it would need to go through a review process at this point to do that.
So the lot that they have is a nice-sized chunk around it. Could they fit other dwellings behind it, or could they do any kind of other businesses or multi-dwelling homes in the back? I mean, with just the footage that it has?
They could at this point, Counselor, but they, with the new zoning or the ordinance they're proposing, the most they could do is a duplex as far as residential went, and even that would need to go through the alterations process.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good use of this ordinance. It's a beautiful old house, and they used to have a great farm there, and I know that they want to develop that property, and that's their choice, but I'm glad to see that they're taking advantage of this, and that maybe that house will be able to be there for a long time. Thank you.
Councilor Brown?
Thanks, Mayor. I just have one more quick question. The only cost to the city involved was just the preparation of the ordinance. Is that correct? I mean, there won't be any other cost to the city to change this designation?
No, Counselor.
Okay, thanks.
I don't see any other questions, so at this time, we normally close a public hearing, which we did in the public record. Is there any counselor who wants to hold the record open for written testimony or to continue the hearing to another time? By seeing none, then the record hearing and the record are closed. So that's pretty much takes care of everything, right, for now? Okay, thank you. So we'll go on to item number 2 for this evening, and that's a public hearing on a special ordinance granting exemption to the application of Section 6.200 of the Eugene Code. City Manager, you want to introduce this one? See if you pass what you have.
I'll try to do a little bit different. I read what I have here, and hopefully it works. The West Eugene Wetland Program has a long history of using controlled ecological burns to manage and restore wetland habitat. Controlled burns have been used in West Eugene since 1986. In order to accomplish these burns, the Wetland Program has sought a series of 5-year exemptions from the city's ban on open burning. The most recent exemption expired on December 31st, 2010. Therefore, the program is seeking another 5-year extension. Controlled burns allow the city and its partners to manage non-native plant species and to protect and restore native plants and wetland habitats in West Eugene. In addition, it provides the Eugene Fire Department and other fire agencies the ability to train fire staff in wildland firefighting.
So in effect, this is a special exemption to our normal practices for specific reasons which we think are in the best interest of the city, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. There's nobody. close the public hearing. I'm going to ask councilors if there's any, Councilor Zelinka?
So, in a nutshell, please explain the rationale for giving ourselves an exemption and not allowing other people to have an exemption. What's so special about this, using the, and burning this wetland area, as opposed to, say, grasslands?
So there's a lot of ecological benefits to this type of burning, controlled burning. In West Eugene, the wetland prairies were historically managed by Native Americans using fire. We have pretty good information about that, and there's growing research every year showing the benefits of fire to a lot of the plants that we're trying to protect. Many of them evolved with fire. So using fire as a tool of land management enhances the native plant community, and in many cases it represses a lot of the non-native species that we're trying to control. It's very different than grass seed burning in all ways. The purpose, the amount of smoke, the risk, all sorts of ways, it's very different from grass seed burning.
How many acres are you going to burn?
Well, we were proposing a maximum within the city limits of 250 acres per year, a maximum outside the city limits within the urban growth boundary of 75 acres per year. Realistically, we've never achieved either of those. I think the largest year lately, we got just over 100 acres, maybe 120 acres, and that was a very good year. The primary limiting factor being weather windows, where we're under very, very tight weather restrictions where everything aligns and the smoke column goes up and out away from the community and won't impact residents. So we usually get 1 or 2 days a year at best where that can happen.
Yeah, that was my next question. How do we prevent it from going into the community? And how do we control the risks of the controlled burn getting out of control?
Staffing. As mentioned, we usually, this is all of our prescribed fires, all of our controlled burns are partnership efforts. The Rivers to Ridges Partnership, formerly the West Eugene Wetland Partnership, includes all of the land managers in West Eugene, the Nature Conservancy, the Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Bureau of Land Management, and the City of Eugene. We typically combine resources for all of our burns, and that usually also brings in the Oregon Department of Forestry. So every burn that we have has a very detailed burn plan that has been identified with all of the resources that will be required in great detail, the number of people, the types of trucks, the types of resources on those trucks, backup plans, things like that. So we have a lot of staff, a lot of equipment, and several tiers of backup plans in place before we do anything.
And then, so this acreage compared to the amount of grass fields that were burned recently, how does that compare?
Our burns are typically, within the city, they've been 40, 50, large one might be 70 acres. Grass seed fields are often several hundred acres. The method with which they burn is different. We'll usually use strip burning as opposed to often grass seed farmers will circle it, all the fire goes into the middle, and by the time it's in there, it's creating its own weather, it's burning very hot. It's also burning a lot more biomass. Grass farms have very, very dense with biomass. The prairies are very dispersed, so most people, you could tell them that we're burning and you wouldn't even see a smoke column from within a few blocks away, whereas you can usually see a grass seed smoke column from miles and miles away.
And how many acres were burned in the grass field burns before they?
Good question. I don't know the answer to. Hundreds, several hundred. Most farms are several hundred acres in size.
Okay. I was very much opposed to the grass seed field burning, but this has a different purpose, and the scale of it is dramatically different. So I'll end up supporting this.
So, I'm sure that can you explain to me what kind of air monitoring goes on during this and what citizens can do if they feel there is any negative effect to them?
Yes. So this starts with a permit, We go to the Lane Regional Air Pollution Authority. Actually, we're preparing our permit this year right now. We propose all the burns that we're expecting to do this year. They'll provide us with weather windows and wind directions for which to burn, and which we can burn. During the day of the burn, we work very closely with them to identify that it is the proper weather. We're on site determining the weather conditions on site, so we let up a balloon and track. It's a very large, colorful balloon that you can see from good distance. You track the height and the trajectory at which it's moving, and then we take weather readings every 15 minutes throughout the burn, determining weather direction, temperature, humidity, things like that that are important. So throughout the entire burn, we're tracking where the smoke column is going. If people are interested or concerned about this, typically, the way the city does it, each of the agencies has a different notification method. The way that we've been working is we will send notification out to people within a half mile, 3/4 of a mile radius of where we're planning on burning well in advance. If they have a concern, they can contact us. We'll let them know the day by phone or email, whichever they prefer, that we're actually going to go ahead with the burn. And they have our contact information directly. By the same token, if there is something happening that we're not aware of, they can call in immediately and provide that information to us, let us know that the smoke is coming to their house or something like that. But we track it pretty carefully.
Thank you. Councilor Brown.
Thanks, Mayor. My understanding from reading the material is that all of these parcels, would be to 320 acres, I think, total, inside and outside the UGB, something like that, roughly. They're not to be burned all at the same time. They would be staggered.
That's correct.
In other words, a few parcels one year, and then the next year a few more parcels, and so on, until it's all run through the cycle, and then perhaps we would approve another extension. But each parcel would be about once every 5 years, I think it said in here. So,
That's our objective, every 3 to 5 years. Although, as I mentioned,
depending on conditions, of course.
we really struggle to get our
Yeah.
burns in.
Yeah, that's a beneficial cycle. I've read a little bit about this. And I was lucky, I don't know, we just lucked out. I saw a controlled burn that the Nature Conservancy oversaw at the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve in Osage County, Oklahoma. It's like the home of the biggest buffalo herd in the United States. They have over 3,000 buffaloes there. And the cowboys were very careful with that burn. And you couldn't even see the smoke until you were right up on top of it. So I have great confidence in this group of people doing these burns. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. So just kind of some logistic questions. The fire department, Eugene Fire Department, I'm sure is alerted. Are there other agencies that play in this controlled burn?
With the city burns, Eugene Fire Department is central. They oversee our burns. The Nature Conservancy typically employs controlled fire contractors. The Oregon Department of Forestry, the City of Eugene, and the Bureau of Land Management all bring fire resources, typically bring fire resources as backup for those fires. On U.S. BLM fires and Army Corps fires, the BLM is the lead agency. The City, Oregon Department of Forestry, and contractors will provide backup.
Okay.
Those are typically the organizations that
So
are
it's a multi-jurisdictional
Yeah.
eye on it, basically. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that does it for us. So I think the hearing's closed and questions have been answered, so thank you very much. I think that finishes our business for the evening, so thank you very much, everybody.
Hey, Dad.